They were Hitler's top commanders, the masterminds behind Germany's most devastating victories. But as the war dragged on, their power crumbled with the Reich. Some fell in disgrace, others defied their Führer, and a few met gruesome fates. These are the 7 greatest German field marshals of World War II. Paul Ludwig Ewald von Kleist. Paul Ludwig Ewald von Kleist's transition from cavalry officer to panzer pioneer exemplified the rapid evolution of warfare in the early 20th century. As Germany embraced mechanized combat, Kleist emerged as a key figure in developing blitzkrieg tactics. His leadership during the invasion of Poland showcased mobile warfare's potential, with his motorized corps swiftly breaking through Polish defenses. The Battle of France proved the true test of von Kleist's innovative approach. Commanding Panzer Group Kleist, he led the thrust through the Ardennes forest, bypassing the Maginot Line and catching the Allies off guard. This maneuver demonstrated the devastating impact of concentrated armored forces, contributing significantly to Germany's swift victory. During Operation Barbarossa, Kleist's Panzer Group advanced deep into Ukraine, achieving notable victories. The First Battle of Kiev highlighted his tactical skills, with his 1st Panzer Army playing a crucial role in destroying the Soviet southwestern front. Von Kleist's mastery of blitzkrieg tactics led to early triumphs, but by 1944 his luck had run out. The Soviets adapted, Germany's supply lines collapsed, and Hitler's strategic interference sealed his fate. Dismissed after the defeat in right bank Ukraine, Kleist's downfall foreshadowed struggles of Germany's top commanders. One of them was Fedor von Bock, whose rigid mindset would soon lead to disaster in the brutal fight for Moscow. Fedor von Bock faced his greatest challenge during Operation Typhoon, the German offensive aimed at capturing Moscow in the autumn and winter of 1941. Despite initial successes, von Bock's rigid tactics and unwavering discipline would ultimately prove inadequate against the harsh realities of the Eastern Front. As the German forces advanced towards Moscow, they encountered severe weather conditions that drastically hampered their progress. The harsh Russian weather had turned roads into muddy quagmires, severely impeding the movement of troops and supplies. This logistical nightmare, combined with stiff Soviet resistance, began to slow the German advance significantly. Von Bock's relationship with Hitler deteriorated as the operation faltered. The field marshal's outspoken nature became a source of tension. Von Bock advocated for a more aggressive strategy toward Moscow, directly conflicting with Hitler's orders. His frustration was evident in his statement: "We are permitting our greatest chance of success to escape us by this restriction placed on our armor." As Operation Typhoon stalled, von Bock's inflexibility became increasingly apparent. His strict adherence to traditional military doctrine proved ill-suited to the unique challenges of the Eastern Front. Von Bock's rigid tactics failed to withstand severe weather, stretched supply lines, and adaptive Soviet strategies. The Eastern Front required a level of strategic flexibility that von Bock struggled to provide. On July 17, 1942, Hitler removed von Bock from his position as commander of Army Group B and appointed Maximilian von Weichs as his replacement. Albert Kesselring. As the war in Eastern Europe raged on, another battlefield witnessed a different kind of German military leadership. Albert Kesselring, nicknamed Smiling Albert, emerged as one of Hitler's most effective defensive strategists, despite his background as a Luftwaffe officer. His remarkable adaptability would shape the Italian campaign and challenge Allied forces for over a year. Kesselring's transition from air to ground command demonstrated his versatility as a military leader. Originally trained in the Luftwaffe, he found himself tasked with defending Italy against the advancing Allied forces. In Italy, Kesselring employed brilliant defensive tactics that prolonged the conflict and inflicted heavy casualties on the Allies. He expertly utilized the mountainous terrain, creating a network of fortified positions that allowed his forces to retreat strategically while maintaining a strong defensive line. This approach effectively turned Italy into a fortress, slowing the Allied advance despite their numerical superiority. Kesselring's command in Italy was further complicated by the need to coordinate with Italian forces. Even after Italy's surrender in 1943, he managed to maintain cooperation with some Italian troops, leveraging their local knowledge to bolster German defenses. However, Kesselring's wartime actions would later cast a shadow over his military achievements. Kesselring's tactical skills made him one of Germany's most formidable defensive commanders, but after the war, his legacy was tarnished by the brutal reprisals under his command, especially the Adriatine massacre, where 335 Italian civilians were executed as a method of retaliation. Tried for war crimes, he was sentenced to death, though it was later reduced to life imprisonment. By 1952, he was released, his name forever tied to both military brilliance and brutal war crimes. Erwin Rommel. The scorching sands of North Africa set the stage for Erwin Rommel's rise to fame as the Desert Fox. Known for his audacious surprise attacks and rapid advances, Rommel emerged as one of Germany's most celebrated military leaders during World War II. As commander of the Afrika Korps, he revolutionized combat in the harsh desert environment. Rommel's unconventional tactics and deep understanding of mechanized warfare set him apart from his contemporaries. His innovative approach allowed his forces to achieve significant victories against the British. The capture of Tobruk in 1942 showcased his tactical brilliance. However, his early successes were not destined to last. Supply issues began to plague his forces, and the overwhelming Allied resources gradually turned the tide. The Second Battle of El Alamein in late 1942 marked a decisive defeat for Rommel's forces, signaling the beginning of the end for the Afrika Korps. Initially favored by Hitler and promoted to Field Marshal, Rommel's relationship with the Führer grew increasingly strained. He became frustrated with Hitler's strategic decisions, particularly regarding the North African campaign. This disillusionment led to a profound shift in Rommel's loyalties. In a surprising turn of events, Rommel became implicated in the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler. This involvement reflected his growing opposition to the Nazi regime. The failed assassination attempt had dire consequences. Rommel had spent years outmaneuvering his enemies, but in the end, he couldn't outmaneuver Hitler. Branded a traitor, he was given two choices: public disgrace or a quiet death. He chose the latter. The Desert Fox's war was over. Walter Model emerged as Hitler's fireman, renowned for salvaging seemingly hopeless situations on both the Eastern and Western fronts during World War II. Model's rise through the ranks was marked by unconventional tactics and adaptability in rapidly changing battlefield conditions. Model's expertise in defensive warfare proved invaluable as Germany's fortunes waned. He earned Hitler's trust by transforming dire situations into manageable ones through tactical ingenuity and a hands-on leadership style. Model frequently visited the front lines to assess situations firsthand and make quick, decisive adjustments to his strategies. During the Ardennes Offensive in December 1944, Model faced one of his most significant challenges. Tasked with coordinating defensive operations and managing the retreat of German forces facing encirclement by Allied troops, Model's ability to adapt to rapidly changing conditions proved crucial. Despite initial successes, the offensive ultimately failed to achieve its objectives, leading to significant losses for German forces. However, Model's tactical ingenuity allowed for a more orderly withdrawal than might have otherwise been possible. As the war entered its final stages, Model found himself facing overwhelming odds. With Allied forces advancing into Germany and his troops encircled in the Ruhr pocket, Model made the difficult decision to disband his forces, recognizing the futility of further resistance. This act marked the end of his military career and the collapse of organized German resistance in the region. Erich von Manstein. Erich von Manstein, born Erich von Lewinsky in 1887, emerged as one of the most talented German field commanders of World War II. Manstein's impact began with his involvement in developing the Sichel-Schnitt plan for the invasion of France in 1940. This bold strategy, calling for a concentrated armored thrust through the Ardennes forest, was initially rejected by the German High Command. However, Manstein's persistence paid off when he presented the plan directly to Hitler, who ultimately adopted it. As the war progressed, Manstein's leadership on the Eastern Front showcased his abilities. Commanding the 11th Army on the Southern Front, he achieved significant victories, including the capture of Sevastopol in July 1942. His effective use of combined arms tactics and rapid maneuvering proved crucial in these operations. Manstein's strategic moves often outmaneuvered his opponents. The Battle of Kursk in 1943 presented Manstein with one of his greatest challenges. His strategic insights played a critical role in the early stages of this massive tank battle. Despite the ultimate defeat for German forces at Kursk, Manstein's tactical abilities remained evident. However, Manstein's relationship with Hitler grew increasingly strained as the war progressed. Clashes over military strategy, particularly regarding the Eastern Front and resource allocation, led to mounting tensions. These disagreements ultimately resulted in Hitler dismissing Manstein in March 1944. Gerd von Rundstedt. A career officer with nearly 5 decades of military service, Gerd von Rundstedt was one of Germany's most experienced field marshals. Unlike many of his peers, he was a traditionalist who valued discipline and loyalty above all else. Despite his aristocratic demeanor, he proved to be an effective strategist, playing a central role in Germany's early victories. In 1940, he led Army Group A during the invasion of France, executing one of the most daring maneuvers of the war, the thrust through the Ardennes. His forces outflanked the Allies, encircled Dunkirk, and forced the British into a desperate evacuation. This triumph helped cement his reputation as one of Germany's premier commanders. His leadership extended to the Eastern Front, where he oversaw Army Group South during Operation Barbarossa. Under his command, German forces captured Kyiv, one of the largest encirclements in history, where over 600,000 Soviet troops were taken prisoner. But despite these victories, Rundstedt was never an advocate for total war. Unlike Hitler, he understood the limits of military power. By late 1941, he warned against pushing deeper into Soviet territory, believing Germany lacked the manpower and resources for a prolonged war in the East. His strategic disagreements with Hitler led to his first dismissal, though he was soon recalled. By 1944, Rundstedt was tasked with defending Western Europe from the inevitable Allied invasion. Despite his reservations, he reluctantly accepted Hitler's orders to fortify Normandy. When D-Day came, he advocated for a flexible, mobile defense, but his recommendations were ignored in favor of Hitler's rigid, hold-at-all-costs strategy. As the Allies broke out of Normandy and pushed into France, Rundstedt grew increasingly frustrated with Berlin's interference. In one infamous moment, when asked how Germany should respond, he snapped, "Make peace, you fools!" His bluntness sealed his fate. Hitler dismissed him once again, replacing him with Albert Kesselring. With that, Rundstedt's 52-year military career came to an end. Unlike many of his counterparts, Rundstedt was never a fanatic. He was a soldier first, a nationalist second, and a Nazi last. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you don't want to miss our video about the lives of Germany's top field marshals after World War II. Want to know what happened to them after the fall of the Third Reich? Click here to uncover their fates. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more World War II stories. See you in the next one.